Hello and welcome to Enterprise App Podcast. I'm Robert Kramer and always Melody Brue joining me today. How you doing, Mel? What's going on?
Good. Doing well. Lots of events lately. Lots of things we're going to cover. Get a little break from travel for just a moment.
Just for a hot minute. And just kind of a little bit of what we're going to cover today and a little bit about both of us. I cover enterprise data, ERP, other things that are associated with that. Mel covers modern work, HCM, customer experience, CRM. So we've got a lot of great stuff to cover. We've both been away, like you mentioned, on these different events, and we got some really nice things to talk about with ZohoDay. I was at SAP to talk a little bit about their autonomous enterprise direction. Salesforce has some new pricing model. We talk about a little bit about RingCentral. You were there recently. And then some other things that we're going to deal with that talk about data strategies and a common single platform around ecosystems. Let's just jump into a disclaimer, then we'll start. This show is for information and entertainment purposes only. While we will discuss publicly traded companies on this show, its content should not be taken as investment advice. ZohoDay. I was there last year. I couldn't make it this year because of some other obligations I had, but it feels like Zoho is quietly operating in the right direction. They don't, necessarily try to look like Salesforce or SAP. So, from your perspective, the evolution this year, what do you think is going on with Zoho, and how was the event?
The event was great. They really do put on a really nice event. They do a really good job, and especially this year, of bringing in a lot of customers, doing those customer stories, those testimonials, and having time to not just have them on a panel, but actually for us to sit down with them and really talk about their implementation, what they get out of Zoho. As you know from being at events in the past, there are many companies that use 35 or more of their apps, and I think they're up to like 50 or something. So there is just this big evolution on their terms. And as you know, they're a privately held company. I had a one-on-one with Tony, the CEO. He said that they intend to stay private, and I think that gives them kind of a lot of sort of leeway and power at the same time, where they can decide what they want to build for their customers. They can do things like they have what they call this transnational localism, where they really concentrate on certain parts of the market. They learn from that. They really dig into what their customers are experiencing. And that's part of why I think those customer stories are so important. And sometimes it's good, just to have kind of a more natural conversation with the customer of, like, for instance, you're using these 18 Zoho apps, but you're still using, Twilio for SMS. Why? And to hear sort of some of the objections, and it's not always because Zoho doesn't do that. It's like, it's the change, right? And we talk a lot about change management. How hard is the lift of changing? And usually that's not necessarily about the technology as much as it is about the people. And so I think where Zoho is really kind of thriving right now is they're layering intelligence across the whole stack. They're improving the usability, tightening up integrations, but they're not really trying to reinvent themselves. They're just trying to look at, like, where are we doing really well? Why are we doing well there? And investing there. And so they're really leaning into being practical and accessible for that mid-market, and even for SMBs, and then somewhat moving up market.
And I like how they invest internally and externally. They have a very good story about internally with their employees, but externally, yes, they're investing in people, and I like that. But the tighter you make your stack, the more controlled the experience is. Do you think that limits them a little bit from an openness ecosystem perspective?
I don't think so. So I think over the last few years, what we've seen is they are more, the openness is actually evolving. They're more open than before. I think they've always had that to some extent, but they're actively creating these capabilities where The APIs are stronger, connectors are broader. I think strategically, the advantage still is in this kind of one Zoho, the broader experience. But they're not building around kind of this best of breed chaos. They're really saying, this is what we do well. And then they're allowing connectors into everything. And so people really can like choose their own journey.
And that's fair. And I know that they want to go up market a little bit with the larger customers. And I think it's important for them to also not outkick what they're capable of doing, because they do just a fantastic job with the smaller customers and the SMBs.
Yeah.
Like you just mentioned. What do you think about going up market?
They are adding capabilities that help to support scale, especially we see it in finance and operations. They still very much serve the small to medium, I would say medium plus enterprise light kind of customer. But where I see that they have a really great advantage right now is that they can scale with those customers. And that was one of my concerns early on, which is, are they going to really be able to thrive at like the large enterprise scale level? What I see now is that they're very disciplined in that kind of mid-market SMB plus, I would say. It's not, yes, of course, they can serve the small businesses, but they can serve that sweet spot really well of that SMB plus. And they know where they win. I mean, they're really smart about their own analytics and why people are using what product and kind of where they need to invest in that. So my concern initially with like, can they scale as those companies grow to, they may start off with a company that's doing a couple $1 million in revenue, and then they're into the, hundreds of millions. Can they grow with that? And it appears to me that they can. And certainly they don't disclose a whole lot of financials, but from the financials and the growth numbers that they showed at ZohoDay, they are doing that. And they're really kind of moving along in that part of their journey.
Yeah, so I think for the customers, when they do grow like that, the question isn't really, is Zoho big enough? The question more is Zoho the right fit for how complex that enterprise is becoming? So I think that time will tell, but it sounds like they're positioning themselves very well.
Yeah. Overall, great event. They always do a really nice job with it. Appreciate the access to not just the customers, but the executive team. And they really show off their culture well. And this is my closing in this. It was really very cute, actually. They had their whole analyst relations and communications team up on the stage at one time.
Oh, nice.
One, that shows me they're really acknowledging their people and how they contribute to the team and to the success of the company. But then each one of them said, thank you for being here, or whatever they said in a different language.
Oh,
it was really special, like really, really neat. It showed so much about the culture of the company. And Zoho doesn't do a ton of marketing. They're starting to do more. If you've been in an airport or seen an Uber wrapped with Zoho lately, they're doing more brand visibility. But there is a lot of strength that lies in their culture and how they've evolved that, and they've stayed the same. And their reasoning for staying private, I think, speaks to a lot of that. But it was just a neat event.
It's just one quick thing with them. The user experience is very good, and and that's a big plus with against their competitors. And I look forward to see them go up market. And it's just a matter of having the features and the capabilities and the correct platform for those enterprises. But they are on their way. So we'll see.
I would agree with that 100%. The user experience is great. I use several of the Zoho apps, and not just is the user experience in the app great, but the user experience from a customer service standpoint is also great.
Yeah.
I've told this story before, but I think it's worth quickly repeating. I had a couple of Zoho apps that I was using, and I hadn't used one of them in a while. And they actually sent me an email and said, hey, it looks like you're not using this. 1, give us some feedback. 2, don't pay for it if you don't need it. That keeps a customer, right?
Absolutely.
That's
It's all about the customers. I mean, and we're leading into SAP in a second, but it's all about them retaining
yeah.
their customers too. Customers are hard to get and easy to lose.
Yes, you can definitely lose a customer because maybe it's not the right solution that they need at the moment, but you gain that trust, they'll be back.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, events. You were in Atlanta with SAP. I know most of it, like a lot of the things that we discuss, we're kind of discussing signals from the event rather than particular things because much of what we see at these events are under NDA. So
Yeah.
tell me about what was the energy around SAP in Atlanta?
I actually liked it. It was at one of their main offices in the United States at Atlanta. So I thought it was very focused,
That's
structured,
nice.
intentional, and SAP is clearly, driving towards more of an autonomous enterprise concept experience. So ERP, and I talk about this a lot, and I think that they understand what they want is to not just be a system of record, which is what most companies use their ERP for, but a system that can guide and execute and make decisions with workflows, et cetera. But those all have to be based on a lot of things set up prior to. But these companies that are on SAP want this, but they need a direction of how to get there. And that goes with, staying true to the customer's needs and not losing the customer. So I think that those concepts that we just briefly brought up are super important.
I think that's neat that they had it in the office. I feel like, often we go to a convention center or a hotel and we don't really get kind of the full experience of what it's like to work there, I think there's a lot to say around like what the company culture is like. Zoom did an event at their headquarters last year, and it was really nice to be there in their space
Yeah.
and kind of get a little bit of that, like, not fly on the wall, but you know what I mean? Like where you get to feel a little bit more of the experience and the culture.
Yeah,
But
they had a break room where we're able to sit and talk to people that were outside of the meeting and in the break room. They actually, I'm a big believer in keeping everybody in the office so they don't have to leave and
yeah,
give them whatever they need, because that downtime when they leave and come back is a lot of time and a lot of wasted time.
yeah,
So they had that set up. So like you said, seeing that was pretty nice.
yeah. I want to push back just a little bit on the system of record that guides and executes decisions inside workflows. We hear this a lot. It's kind of, I think, everybody's North Star, not everybody, but but is it happening in reality? Is this real architecture?
I think it's partial right now, and it's only working because the system has not been completely redesigned. And I don't believe any ERP system has been redesigned to become full blown event driven, which is, I think, part of the problem of a lot of the customers not modernizing yet, because they the adoption and to absorb the technology multiple times to modernize every time a new release comes out is pretty daunting. So I think they need to be able to see the ROI to actually take that big leap. And I actually kind of agree with that because it's very challenging. So right now that system of action is happening, but it's only within certain modules. And that's predicated, like we talk about the data being set up and how important it is for that to be able to be done. Because if I think a lot of these enterprises, they see that they are using 50% of the system now with whatever antiquated system they're on premise, whatnot. But to go and use all this work and to be 50% on the new system doesn't really get them anywhere. It's a loss of time. And I think that what your question was spot on. How far away are we from really seeing this full blown? And I think we might be a few years, but that wasn't something that SAP really talked about. They were more about their latest technology and what modernization is.
Mhm.
But the further we get down the line, the enterprises are going to be stuck where they're at, and the gap between innovation where it's at and where they're sitting from a readiness perspective of innovation aptitude is going to be severe. So that's why I always talk about you got to jump in at some point, because it's going to be too big of a challenge to adopt some of this. Does that
Mhm.
make sense? And it's complicated, but I think this is the direction that I think a lot of ERP vendors are in and a lot of their customers.
So do you believe in this direction?
I do. I actually, I wrote an article about 6 months ago about event-driven ERP, and I think a lot of people thought like that's, we're not sure we're going in that direction, and I think that
Mhm.
is truly the direction. And I kind of laid out what everybody has to do. I kind of wrote it real quick, like the Jerry Maguire article. Like I'm like, that is,
Stream of consciousness?
yeah, and I'm like, this is exactly what's going to happen, I ran it by a few people, and they went, "Well, I don't know." Now those people are like, "Well, I think this is exactly it." And we could put it in the show notes, but I think that it is a direction, and there has to be a compelling ROI for the enterprises to move forward, and they haven't seen it yet. And I think SAP is trying to understand where the customer is at. And it all falls back to the implementation and change management. And I think that we've worked for companies and we've seen this happen, that if it fails in the implementation, then the things that you mentioned, the event driven or the system of action can't execute because the pieces are not in place. It's actually very complex, but it is what it is.
Yeah,
So
that readiness is important, and
it
I've heard you say many times the cost of doing nothing is more expensive than
and
getting
it
yourself
is,
ready.
and you want to be able to you need to invest in yourself, and that's what I think that the customer's own part of that as well.
Mhm.
But you were at RingCentral's analyst event, and um, you know, communications used to be standard. Now it's strategic. So
Yep.
what's new with RingCentral?
You are right. It used to just be what I think people refer to as like the dumb pipe. Used to be plumbing, but it is so needed. And RingCentral has made a big shift over the last couple of years, evolving from really that traditional UCaaS provider to now being really AI-driven communications platform. They have, I think, voice is their really key differentiator. They have, obviously, that's their heritage. That's kind of where they come from and where they have a lot of strength. And so now to have that as a key interface between people and intelligent agents, they've done a really great job of building for this. They I know just from interactions with them, they are an AI first company, not just in terms of what they build, but what they do. So they have been experimenting with AI. They have been like, I think pretty much it's a mandate from leadership that they are using AI, not just their own, of course, but others as well. They're really heavily invested into how AI can transform their their company, and then learning from that and how they can transform for their customers. So new AI layers with several different products across these orchestration systems that are all built on RingCentral's telephony and contact center base. So really connecting workflows, automating these cross-platform application tasks with their, again, really practical customer use cases. We heard from customers, got to talk to them for a bit. Here's the thing that I came away with, from the most part, is that their leadership is a really big differentiator. They have a bunch of what people refer to as boomerang employees, so people who left the company for whatever reason, and I kind of tried to dig a little bit on that, because I think people leave a company for a reason. And more importantly, in this instance, people come back for a reason.
Mhm.
And to me, this shows like a very aligned leadership that has like very much in that Kira Makagon, who's their new-ish, she's a year in as president and COO. She treats things like a startup. It's like move fast, make decisions. She encourages people to make decisions in their line of business. It's really like a tight run ship at this moment. So I think with this kind of like very disciplined cash generating execution, their AI vision, and then these employees who seem just very well aligned on the strategy and the vision moving forward. I came away with it, even though everything was under NDA, and they do have some interesting conversations that are coming up pretty soon, interesting announcements. I came away with it, that's kind of my biggest takeaway. They have some impressive technology, but it really takes impressive leadership to get it there.
I mean, you said some just amazing things there about them, and they hold, a lot of information from a communication standpoint. Do you think that it's AI, from the role that it plays, is it a challenging readiness that the customers need to be able to execute with AI, or it's pretty inherent with everything that they're doing that the customer doesn't have a lot to set from a setup perspective?
The setup perspective is actually very simple. It is their CRM integrations are very deep. They're like the things like AI summaries. Those can become workflow triggers. It's not just, oh, I have a summary over here and I have to go put it here to get something out of it, or I have a conversation here and then I have to put it into my CRM. The integrations are actually pretty, I don't like the word seamless, but they're pretty seamless. So I think that the more embedded that the communication becomes in the process, the more strategic and also integrated it becomes.
Right. Well, sounds fantastic, and making great progress. What you said about the employees leaving and coming back, that says a lot for the evolution that's really happening at RingCentral, and the technology that they're employing, I think, is fantastic based on that. So
somebody said that in one of the analysts, like the executive Q&A, I did ask the question, like, what was happening then that people were leaving and coming back? But I didn't get, of course, you have to get like the toe the company line answer. I kind of jokingly said what sucked then that doesn't suck now, which was just a joke, but people leave for a reason, right? So, and one of the answers was there was a time when people were saying UCaaS is dead. And now voice is so important. And I have said this in our 2026 predictions, voice is going to become a primary interface for AI. And so when you have that power of voice, and then you can build on top of that, and all of those things integrate, you become not just better communicators, more productive, but you actually start to really see revenue producing activities, and the ROI becomes very apparent.
It's a piece of data. So yeah, I mean, it's a big deal. So when we talk a little bit about Salesforce and their agentic work unit, we all talk about how do you price things out, paying per unit of work instead of per seat. So on the surface, this sounds kind of logical, and I actually got quoted in an article recently about it. I think there has to be something introduced at this level, because it actually monitors the activity, but not necessarily whether the activity was done right. But what's your take?
I think that Salesforce they're experimenting with different pricing models, and they've kind of come out with various things from time to time. But it shows that they're sort of evolving with what their customers want. I think also where people need predictability in spend, and everyone is sort of trying to address this, what people are calling SaaS apocalypse, the death of SaaS per seat models. So I think just from a structural standpoint, if the revenue scales with usage, not headcount, then that's powerful. But there is a lot of complexity in the monitoring of the usage. These are, additional tools and I guess, like the monitoring of tokens. This is a currency.
Right. Well, I think there has to be a way to price things out on both sides, because per seat license, it's been around for a long time. And when you went and sold a new system, they wanted 50 licenses for, 300 people that would potentially use it. But a lot of that time, those 200 or so were not able to be on those seats because of a cost budget, et cetera, consumption is a great way to go because it gets more people on the system. And if these systems are used as intended, you'll get your money back. So this is another way to try and handle the activity of the agents. But I'm not sure this is the best way, but it's a start in the right direction. I don't think there's been a lot of positive feedback from people on it, but they have to do something.
I think where this gets complicated is a lot of people have been talking about kind of like an outcome-based pricing, and not all outcomes are the same. Not all outcomes have the same quality. You're kind of going from a like per seat price to what's generated, but who's to say what's generated is what I intended? So I think right now enterprises still need really strong guardrails and really thoughtful agent design. Otherwise, you're just paying for motion.
Right. Well, it sounds like we're saying the same thing. Something has to be established, but I'm not sure why it has to be outcome based. If something's being used, then you pay for that use. So, if you don't like your steak that you had at a restaurant, you still have to pay for it. But at the same time, the agents are doing work. Someone's doing the work. So it's activity based, not outcome based. So maybe there's another layer of this that can be said, but I think I actually feel that it's a step in the right direction. So,
I don't think we have come to a conclusion industry-wide about what the best pricing is for agentic AI. I think this is going to continue to evolve as the cost of compute either goes down or up, the cost of electricity goes down or up. I mean, there are so many variables here and what customers want. I think flexibility is key.
Yep.
And so I think we'll see that. I like the fact that Salesforce continues to sort of evolve with what customers need and want as these models get more advanced, as the use cases expand throughout the company, and as they start getting pressure on this per seat pricing, which is what we've seen, from the market react to lately. So,
right, I agree.
Not the end of this story. So, you have an interesting take on now. Do you say CAIP, or does this acronym have a pronunciation cap?
It stands for something, but it stands for cognitive automation, advanced analytics, integration, interoperability, and personalization. So,
but do you call it CAP or do you call it CAIP?
I think you call it CAIP.
Okay, so your CAIP
I'll come back to you on that
framework.
Yep.
Tell me, does it serve as a structural model for intelligent ERP, or is this like a conceptual thing?
No, it's a structural model. And I think a lot of times most ERPs, when they fail, it's because there isn't the structure set up. So, a lot of times the breakdown happens after the technology has been exhausted, and that will kind of show you that some of these things the automation's not working because the workflows weren't set up right. The analytics aren't correct because of something similar. It's not personalized. You don't know who's supposed to make decisions based upon if this happens, this person does this. Those things aren't in place, then the technology is not the problem, it's the structure. So it forces alignment between automation, analytics, integration, and user context.
So what's the difference between adding more tools and also what's the technical gap?
So I'm a huge believer in keeping the technology stack as small as you can, because it just adds complexities. And a lot of times your features and functionality are already part of what you already bought. So it's about coordinating what already exists. If analytics flag a margin issue, but there's no predefined workflow, who owns it, nothing moves. So who owns that problem?
So there's a lot to unpack on this. You wrote a LinkedIn story.
Yep, long form article. Yeah, everybody can dive into it there.
Yeah, we'll track that or link that in the comments, because I think there's a lot there to kind of understand, and also I think you give an interesting perspective on that. It still seems like early, right, on this?
Yeah, it's just more about accountability and workflow design. If think you can have the best, system in place, but if it's not set up right with the data that we talk about a lot, but the structure is not set up about who owns this or that and what happens with, this happens with supply chain or, finance issues or inventory, mins and maxes. There needs to be, ways to account for that and rectify that. And this is what that's about, or part of that structural setup. So we'll link it and see if that helps anybody.
Awesome. Let's move on. Enterprise data platforms. Your argument is that ecosystems win over single platforms. Where are you coming from here?
Well, we've been talking about platforms for a little bit, and how I see that platforms are becoming it's more not just features and capabilities, it's more the platform. So this is a reality, and multi-cloud is normal. SaaS fragmentation is normal, but no single platform really handles, the ingestion of data, governance, transformation, analytics, and AI across all these distributed environments. So the ecosystem, from that perspective, is really a main point here.
So, if I'm boiling this down, are you saying that the platform strategy, it just isn't enough?
No, I think when you're buying from somebody, say you're going to buy from Databricks or Snowflake or Microsoft or Oracle, I think that you're making a decision on their ecosystem before you select the platform. So the real questions are operational. Does their ecosystem bring you what you need outside of the main platform that you're selecting, so you can drive all the different features and functionality that you need? So I think we're getting smaller in the technology stack and looking more at the ecosystem of the platforms that you're going to work with. And then those platforms talk to each other via APIs or agents, whatnot. And I think that's the future designs that I see coming down from a data platform perspective.
Give me like a real use case scenario. Like what are vendors doing adapt to this? And then what is the buyer actually buying? What are they looking for?
Well, the buyer is going to look at, say, it could be an ERP system, it could be a CRM system, it could be a supply chain, it could be an HCM system, a customer experience. They need all these to talk to each other. So instead of going and buying one platform and then getting another platform, they're looking at the ecosystem. So these all talk to each other, and inherently they're getting their data to go across all these quickly. So can you onboard data quickly? Are the definitions consistent from one platform to another? Does insights move into action no matter which platform you're in? So they're sharing the data throughout all those platforms in one ecosystem that talks to each other. If that makes sense.
I feel like that continues to be a conversation about AI, and readiness is so much to do around the data and whether the data is ready. And I feel like there's either the conversation of, if you're already on the platform, then your data should be ready, right? Like if you're in a Salesforce, you shouldn't have already been there without your data being ready. But then there's still this conversation of like, well, my data isn't ready to take advantage of all of these tools. So we're kind of going in circles a little bit right now of how ready is ready,
Well, I think it's, so if you were looking for a new system, I mean, I think you want where everything talks to each other. And the first thing you want to do is get that data right, because all the things I just mentioned that you're talking about, you can't execute unless the data is at that readiness stage to utilize all this technology. And that's when people do these transformations and they go too quick and like we're up and running, but the data is blotched in some areas. That will never get corrected because it's such a monumental task. And as the years go by, it doesn't get better. So I know there's a lot of tools out there and they do work, but a lot of times it's still not a bad idea to set up, some of these go 0 to 1, 0 to 50, 0 to 75, like we both talk about, and just get some of them in the data so it's correct and you can see that execution, and you believe in it. But most of the good stories that I hear are when the data has been manually put in.
That's a lot of data to put in manually for a lot of companies. I mean, that's a heavy lift.
It is a heavy lift, and but maybe it's not all the files. Maybe it's your master files that you're putting in. When these things are messed up, I mean, how many times have you been at you've worked at a company and the customers? There's some customers that are in there 15 times with and the parent-child products are wrong, the unit measures are off, and this will haunt forever. And the vendors are setting up the systems to take advantage of the technology based upon the data being good.
And don't you think, though, that AI will evolve to the point of being able to kind of self-clean?
I think so. And it is right now. There's a lot of tools out there, but it has to be guided to make sure it's cleaning it right. And I think there's a lot of it gets into the strategicness of the employees, making sure that they're monitoring that. I still think there's something to be said to put in less than more to make sure it's correct, and it's a training exercise to put it in as well, because you learn the system. When a file master has, say, like 80 fields, and you understand what those 80 fields do, then you learn what the power of the system versus just getting the task done. So I think it's an interesting point that you made, and also a proper training exercise. And that's why I don't think these companies want to do it a second, third time. They have to see the ROI, but they have to follow the guidance of the implementation of the vendor, because they have great programs out there to help them.
Yeah. So final thought, what's your advice to companies looking to go along this, as you say, modernization?
I think that, like I mentioned before, I think that the cost of doing nothing is very expensive. And I think that there's a lot of tools out there and systems, and they're all designed around a very powerful ecosystem. So I would urge them to look at the ecosystem, the marketplaces that they have connected to, and if that data can float from one platform to another. I think that that's the wave of the future. And I would urge them also to get in bed with a great ERP vendor that that they can communicate with and implement, and it tailors to their business and specifically their industry. So
that's a great way to end. What do you have coming up next?
oh my God, this is a busy spring, don't you think? I have
Always.
Microsoft FabCon, which is a data around Microsoft Fabric, which I work with them, and then also Infor. Have them coming up, and Epicor, so a couple of different ERP vendors, and also cybersecurity with RSA. How about yourself? And Google.
And there's a lot. Yeah, I actually don't have a whole lot of travel at the moment, working on some projects that can't talk about yet. Although I am going to Cancun for spring break.
Yay.
Which would be great. I have 3 years in a row of a graduating high school senior. So
That's congratulations.
That's my next thing. And then I get back from that and I go off to Zoom Perspectives in Half Moon Bay and Adobe Summit, which is always one of my favorite events, in April. So
wonderful.
Thanks to everybody for joining us. We will be talking about all of those events, although we probably won't talk too much about my spring break trip, but if you want to hear about it, we'll let you know. But thanks for joining along. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you like what you saw, please hit like and subscribe, because we'd love for you to keep along with us on our Enterprise Applications podcast. Once again, I'm Melody Brue with Robert Kramer. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you.